Good evening, beautiful people. My name's Darrien Davenport, Dr. D to a lot of folks. I am the Assistant Vice President for College Life, as well as the Assistant Secretary to the Board of Trustees at Gettysburg College of Pennsylvania. And I'm a co-facilitator for this evening's program, First and Phinest, the History of Black Greek Letter Organizations. Before we jump into everything, I'm going to go ahead and allow my co-facilitator to introduce herself. Just a couple of housekeeping items. If you have questions, this is really going to be a pretty open exchange. So if you have questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask them. If you're not comfortable asking questions in that way, please use the chat feature, and we'll try to get to as many questions as possible. So with that, I'd like to welcome in my colleague, my friend and colleague, Jeanne Arnold.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jeanne Arnold. I'm the Chief Diversity Officer at Gettysburg College since 2014. And I'm just happy to be with everyone tonight to talk about the Divine Nine.
Great. So Jeanne mentioned the Divine Nine. She and I are both members of Divine Nine organizations. And when we talk about Divine Nine, those are the 9 historically Black Greek letter organizations that were founded in the early 20th century. Those organizations are Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, which was founded in 1906 at Cornell University. That is the organization I'm a member of. Then we have Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, which was founded in 1908 at Howard University, which is the organization that good Dr. Jeanne Arnold is a member of. You have Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, which was founded in 1911 at Indiana University. You have Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, which was founded also in 1911 at Howard University. You have Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, which was founded in 1913 at Howard University. You have Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, which was founded in 1914 at Howard University. You have Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, which was founded in 1920 on the campus of Howard University. You have Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated, which was founded in 1922 in Butler University. And then you also have Iota Phi Theta Fraternity Incorporated, which was founded in 1963 at Morgan State University. And if you notice, 6 of the 9 organizations were founded at an HBCU. So I want to talk a little bit about just how things began. And as a member of Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, I'll start. I'm not going to get into, leagues and leagues of history of Phi A. I'd be talking to y'all all day. But I really just want to talk about the necessity for developing a Greek letter organization. So when you talk about Cornell University, Cornell being a historically white institution, you have Black students who were looking to find their place on campus. They were looking, in a lot of ways, as some students still do, looking for their people. So in early 1900s, a study group formed on the campus of Ithaca, New York, which was actually, it started in double-digit numbers with the precursor, C.C. Poindexter, who was looking to pull students together just as a study group. Now, you have to keep in mind when you think about 1905, 1906, and around that time, that was 10 years after Plessy versus Ferguson. And for those folks who are not Plessy, who don't understand or don't remember or recall or know what the case of Plessy versus Ferguson was, that was the catalyst for segregation. So when you think about separate but equal, which was really separate but unequal, especially in the South, a lot of Black people really didn't find their way or find places for them on these campuses where they were very much the racial minority. So here comes, Alpha Phi Alpha, and you have the founders, which we call as Jules, that came together because they wanted to provide a space and an opportunity for students to engage. This went from a study group and actually later evolved to a fraternity. And that evolved because the members of our founders, members that worked for the white fraternities, they saw the structure, they saw the operation, and they wanted to structure something similar to provide a foundation for these Black students on this campus. We have 7 founders. We affectionately call them Jules. They are Henry Arthur Callis, Charles Henry Chapman, Eugene Kinkle Jones, George Biddle Kelly, Nathaniel Allison Murray, Robert Harold Ogle, and Burton Woodson Tandy. And those 7 men came together to form Alpha Phi Alpha on, as we say, an ice cold Tuesday, December 4th, 1906, on the campus of Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. But that founding really was the catalyst for the other members of the Divine Nine, understanding that, specifically African-American students wanted opportunities to be able to come together in this sense to build a bond. And through the lens of Alpha Phi Alpha, a lot of our focus is on scholarship, it's on service and being able to do that. So for us, our aims are manly deeds, scholarship, and love for all mankind. And our motto is, first of all, servants of all, we shall transcend all. So a lot of what we were trying to do when we started Alpha Phi Alpha was really to try to build this sense of community for Black people who found themselves at historically white institutions, but were not able to connect. And because of segregation, so even though segregation was a law of the South, it very much manifested in the North, where we were shut out of these types of opportunities. Instead of being shut out, we decided to create our own space. And that is really how Alpha Phi Alpha began and spurred the movement for what became Black Greek life, not only in America, but internationally. So with that, I will turn to my colleague and friend, Jeanne Arnold, to talk about Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated.
Thanks, Darrien. So similarly to what Darrien stated, we came next, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, founded on January 15th, 1908. And then we were not incorporated until a few years later in 1913. But again, on Howard's campus, the main founder, the person who really had the idea, Ethel Hedgeman at the time, then Ethel Hedgeman Lyle later on, with 8 of her colleagues at Howard, decided they wanted to pull a group together that could really focus on the issues of women and girls, and to promote, the status of particularly Black women and girls in the society. And so after the incorporation, several things came into play. Just as Darrien said, we have a motto, by merit and culture. The mission is really focused on cultivating and encouraging high scholastic and ethical standards. But really the main line that you hear from that, the tagline over the years into the present day, is service to all mankind. So we consider ourselves a service organization. And we are, primarily Black, but not exclusively Black. So there are other members, they're members of the sorority who are not African American. And as many of you probably know, our most famous member at this point is Vice President Kamala Harris. So I think for those who didn't know about Alpha Kappa Alpha before the election, they've heard of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated at this point. So we've always been focused on service, the Black family, health, those kinds of things. Under our current international president, Dr. Glenda Glover, who is the president of Tennessee State, she has her own targets. Every time a new international president comes in, they make 4 or 5 different focus areas, but always you'll hear it going back to scholarship, to education, to health. So currently, her targets are HBCU for life, meaning we should support HBCUs for life. And we've raised $1 million several different days. We just take a day and we decide to raise $1 million for HBCUs when all the AKs, call in and pledge. She's also focused on women's health care and wellness, on building our economic legacy. That's another one of hers, as well as the arts and having a global impact. So all of the targets, no matter the international president over these 110 years, have something to do with those kinds of things. So at this point in time, we are about 300,000 members. About 75,000 of those are active. And we are, across the United States and in 9 different countries. We break ourselves up into regions, and we've expanded to Africa, South Africa, Bahamas, Liberia, and a variety of other places. But again, the reason was that we came together was to uplift ourselves, uplift the community, and commit ourselves to service. And it is a lifelong commitment, I should mention. So unlike majority fraternities and sororities, in some cases, when we join the organization, it is a lifetime commitment. So not just on the undergraduate level, but on the graduate level as well. And last thing I'll say, we can just open it up and have conversation, talk about our own experiences. So the reason I have pearls on tonight, which I don't usually wear for work, is that is one of our symbols, pearls, 20 pearls. You'll hear that phrase, and that's to represent the combination of our founders and our incorporators. So I'll stop there and we can have a conversation.
I think one of the things too I want to really accent that Jeanne spoke about was just the leadership. We talk about people who are high profile or famous folks. I know for Alpha, but not just for Alpha and AKA, but just throughout the Divine Nine. When you talk about Black leadership, a lot of Black leadership was funneled through Black Greek letter organizations. So, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, who's an Alpha. Currently we talked about Sister Harris, Sister Vice President Harris,
Right.
But Dr. Reverend Warnock is an Alpha, the first Black senator in Georgia. So when you think about the theme of the program and First and Phinest, you'll often find that we find ourselves as Black Greeks, really trailblazing in a way. And a lot of that has to do with the fundamentals of the organizations that we've joined and how they've shaped and developed us and grown us in a way to get us to a point of being able to lead in a trailblazing way. Just to give you a little bit of Gettysburg Black history, because we got to do it. But Dr. Jeanne Arnold and myself are the first two Black people to ever serve on President's Council in the history of the college. So the college getting close to 200 years old, so it's an honor to be able to serve with her as two of the first. And the interesting thing about history is that you don't really think about it while you're in it, you just do it.
Right.
You just do it, you do the work. So when we think about the brothers and sisters that have, come up through or going on past or currently lead, they don't really lead fixate on the fact that they'll be the first X or Y. They've been shaped and conditioned to just trailblaze through what they've done through Black Greek letter organizations. So I'll stop there unless, Jeanne, we want to talk about what attracted us.
Yeah, we can talk a little bit. I'll talk a little bit about our own undergraduate experience. Go ahead.
So I'll start. Mine was it was interesting. I'm a first gen kid, Philadelphia. I didn't really know a ton about Black Greek letter organizations growing up in Philly. So when I got to college, it was an eye-opening experience. And I went to Westchester University, which is an HWI, and we had all but one of the Black Greek letter organizations on campus. So everybody on our campus was active, and not including Omega Psi Phi. Everybody else was active. And at that point, it was really just 8 because Iota Phi Theta wasn't really recognized at that point as part of the group of Black Greek letter organizations. So that, I'm probably dating myself, but that's how long ago it was. And as a young person who, was first gen, I really struggled in college. I was seeking mentorship. I was seeking people to connect with. And during that time, there was a brother who I'm still close to named Kevin Jackson. He was literally the last Alpha on Westchester's campus, and he was graduating my first year. But I really connected with him for a few reasons. And the first reason was, dude was like stellar academically. Like he had like a 3.8 and was working and doing all these things. And he was also an economics and finance major. So we connected in that way. And I just always looked up to how tenacious he was and how academically sound he was. Like he was just a really solid brother. He was an upstanding brother. And I remember asking him about how he found Alpha Phi Alpha. And a lot of it was the same way. So when we talk about scholarship, that's just not a motto or not something that we just say because it sounds great or it has a ring to it. He actually was living those words. He was living the mission of Alpha Phi Alpha. And I really endeared myself to him in that way. I still look up to him. And I've been in the fraternity now. I'm coming up on my 25th anniversary. No jokes, Monique. I'm coming up on my 25th anniversary. And I still look up to him because he's just such a phenomenal person and such a phenomenal leader. And then I started learning more about the organization, and you learn about the Jesse Owens of the world, and you learn about the Thurgood Marshalls of the world, and how all of them, like I discussed before, trailblazed in that way. And I just, for me, and it's no slight on any other organization, but for me, that's what fit me as an individual. And there was also, so one of the major programs that we had, especially during the 20th century, was go to high school, go to college. So there was this focus on education. And unbeknownst to me, who was an economics major back then, I really had this love for education. I had this zeal for education. Here I am years later working in higher education. So it was really the connection to who Kevin was as a person and how he represented Alpha and how he really brought forward the mission of the organization and really lived the values of the organization. And it was also the organization itself and what they stood for and who came through and the expectations. Dr. Arnold talked earlier about this being a lifelong commitment. It's not just, you go through 4 years and after that, it's over. There's not only a commitment, but usually an expectation that you stay connected and you do service for your community and you do support and create pipelines and create opportunities for people that come behind you. One of the things about Black Greek-led organizations, they have graduate chapters. So if you find yourself in a situation where you attend a school that doesn't have an organization that you're looking for, you can pursue a graduate chapter. And still become a member. So not everybody goes through the undergraduate vessel, but I did, and which, gosh, 25 years, that's starting to hit different now. But I did, and I'll be honest with you, it helped to shape me and it helped to keep me focused. And I remember specifically going through the process of my dissertation and wanting to quit mad times, and having my Alpha brothers, my one brother, Mark Barnes, who is he is a geographer and he works at Morgan State University. After he got his doctorate, he turned around and he was on my back. He was on my back because he's like, this is what we do, D. Like, this is what, like, we transcend. Like, this is what we do. And he pushed me to the end. So that's a little bit about why I got involved in. And part of it is, which, looking at the work that we do in higher ed, is to create opportunities, create more access for folks that are coming behind me. And that's part of what Alpha taught me.
So for me at Penn State main campus, there weren't a lot of people of color there in the 70s, in the 1970s when I was there. And so for me, it was a combination of recognizing the women who were involved in service, who were giving back to the local community. And also it was the sisterhood part of it. So we are a service organization, but we are also a sisterhood. It's not just a club. We connect with one another, we commit to each other, to uplift each other, and to, be a network, provide a network for each other, no matter where we are in the country or in this country or in the world. So I have had the occasion over 45 years of consistent membership since I came into the organization at Penn State, to live in different parts of the country. So in 4 different regions. Remember, I mentioned we break ourselves into regions. And each time I have moved, whether that was to Florida or Michigan or Virginia Beach, all I had to do was back then pick up the phone, because we didn't even have email. But anyway, pick up the phone or write a letter, to the head of the president of that chapter in that particular location. And they welcomed me in like they had known me my entire life, and I didn't know those women from anywhere, but it was the sisterhood, the national network. So, I've found, what dentist should I go to? What pediatrician for my kids? How do I find a job? All of those things. People just wrap their arms around you and help you, even though, they have never met you before, because you're a part of the sisterhood. When I was living in Michigan, before I came to Grand Valley, after I left Grand Valley and came to Gettysburg, I had an experience, or my daughter had, she wanted to join the sorority. And when you have a parent or another relative in the sorority, you're considered what they call legacy. And, you're supposed to be admitted, provided you meet the other qualifications, scholastically and all that. But, so I'll tell a little bit of the negative part of our history. So sometimes at our HBCUs, when students learn that someone is a legacy, they just don't see that as a positive. They think the person's trying to get into the organization without meeting the qualifications, which is not permitted. So anyway, long story short, my daughter at Clark Atlanta some years ago was, I can't think of another word for it, so I'll say blackballed. So she was, as soon as they knew she was the daughter of someone in a sorority, they did not allow her to get online. And so anyway, when I was in Michigan some years later, and they took me in like they, women always do. And I happened to mention to them that my daughter had had this negative experience. I was very upset about it. I had talked to the leadership and the international president at the time. I really was upset about it. And anyway, they said, well, that's not a problem because the next initiation that we have, you bring her here. And at that time, my daughter was a graduate student in California. And they said, no, it's not a problem. Bring her here. And I brought her there for the process. And she is a member of the sorority and has been since 1908. So it's a real sisterhood. And, I have just valued it. I think I got into it because, like I said, I met the women who were active on the campus, but I didn't go to college with the intention of joining a sorority. It was towards the end of my junior year when I actually did it. And that's because I had this circle of friends and was working with them and doing things with them. And they were the AKAs at Penn State at that time. So it was like the natural thing, I guess, then to do, but it wasn't a plan. And in fact, my godmother, who's also an aunt to my aunt and my godmother, who is a Delta, loves to tell the story about how she dressed me in red and white since, from the time I was an infant. And so she was not that happy when I got to Penn State and decided that I was going to join Alpha Kappa Alpha. But we are all sisters. We are all sisters. And at Penn State particularly, there was no negative rivalry. I mean, we supported each other's events, we supported each other's projects, and it just made the family larger to have all of these different parts of the group come together. And so it's really been a blessing to me, I think, in my life. And I've prided myself on always being financial, always being a member of a chapter. Now, there were times when I was less active because I had little kids or whatever, and I didn't have the time, but I was always financial. I didn't want any break in service, so to speak. And so also when I was in Michigan before coming to Gettysburg, nobody wanted to step up and be the president of the chapter. It's a major job, even if you have a small chapter, it's a lot of work in addition to your full-time job. But after they had been so kind to me as to bring my daughter into the sorority through there, I really couldn't say no. So then I ended up serving as the president for 4 years while I was in Michigan. But I was, when it's your time to step up, you have to step up. Other women at the time had little children and couldn't do it or what have you. But when it's your time, if you can do it, you have to do it. And so that's how we all, kind of take on our responsibilities. So again, it's been a blessing. And I am at the 45-year mark. And when you get to the 50-year mark, it's called golden. So I'm looking forward to 5 more years. I can deck myself out in all gold apparel and travel to my national conference for my 50th anniversary. So 5 more years to go.
So with that, I know, Dr. Arnold and I, we've given history and then our histories, but we would definitely open it up to to all of you. If you have questions of us, just about, our organizations, again, how we, connected or how we grew up in them or what it means to be first. I think that piece can't really be, you can't really undervalue that. And, you think about Vice President Harris and being an AKA, but also being the first, Black woman vice president, right? You think about like we see it and it's like, man, that's progress. Like this is great. But then you also think of like, wait, we had senators and governors and, House reps that were Black right after slavery, right? So it's like we've come far. Have we come far enough? And, what does it mean to be first? And what pressure comes with that, right? Because, I think I don't want to speak for Jeanne. I'm speak for myself. I think when you find yourself in a situation where you're the first, there's a little bit of pressure because you want to make sure that you're not the last.
Exactly.
And that part is really important. So, but again, this is, we definitely want to open it up to open the floor up to you folks to ask us questions that you might have. Don't be shy. I know some folks on here. I'm about to start calling name.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see some. Be nice to see some faces too. If you don't mind turning your cameras on, it'd be nice to see some faces. Oh, here's one up here in the corner. Good.
There we go. We got some folks turning some cameras.
Some brave people turning their cameras on. Thank you.
Love it. Love it. Love it.
Great. That's great. Oh, look at that.
Look at all the smiles. See, we would be missing all these smiles, y'all.
All we had to do was ask. Okay. That's great.
Hey, Thea. Is that Tamaya I see? Wait, look at you. Yeah. Don't try to hide. I see you too.
Anybody curious about anything we didn't mention? Anything about being a member of a Greek letter organization?
Or want to talk more about the history of all of this, or?
I have a question.
Sure.
Do you mind talking a little bit about the active organizations here at Gettysburg?
Oh, well, that is a good question.
Greek letter organizations?
Mhm.
The NPHC ones specifically.
Okay. Well, I don't know if I'm the best one to recite it, but I can start unless you want to do it, Darrien.
Yeah, we have now, so currently active, we have Zeta Phi Beta sorority incorporated on campus as far as NPHC organizations. There have been others that have been members here. I know there's been a chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity incorporated that's been here. Phi Beta Sigma has been here. I believe SG Rho, Sigma Gamma Rho has also been here before. But as far as chapters that are currently active with members on campus, it would be Zeta Phi Beta.
The good news is, though, that we have over the last few years talked to the corporate offices of Delta Sigma Theta and Alpha Phi Alpha, and we are authorized to be a chapter. We are a chapter if we can get some members in. Now we have, and these are joint chapters, which is oftentimes what small schools have to do to maintain a certain level of membership. So if I'm not mistaken, our Delta Sigma Theta chapter is in partnership with Dickinson.
That's correct.
And so we'll be looking, when we can all get back in person and these processes are then authorized again, we want to get some members into that group. Now, Alpha Phi Alpha, I think there's 3 different colleges are connected, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's mainly out of Millersville. It's Iota
Okay.
Sigma. Yeah.
Okay. So we really want to get these things going. To me, going to Penn State, which was, traditionally white institution, it really made the difference. It really was a way for me to feel in community with other women there on the campus. So it was part of my retention strategy. I mean, it was really what kept me there and kept me feeling like I had a family. Back then, we had a kind of a suite. We had a suite at the end of a hallway. We all had our rooms on the same hallway of that particular residence hall. And then we would gather in the suite at the end of the hall, which was a big meeting room with a kitchen. I mean, so there was real community there. And each of the groups had their own suite and hallway. The guys, they sometimes had houses, but most, the women, we stayed on campus. So it was really creating that sense of community. And that's what those 9 women originally at Howard were really talking about. We want to raise the issues of women and girls. We want to support each other, and we want to cultivate friendship. They actually had that written into their mission. It was all about friendship, and that persists today in addition to the service aspect.
Yeah. And I know for me, we were charged with, go ahead.
I was going to say thank you, and thank you for sharing your experiences.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thanks for the question. Yeah, no, my experience was different from Jeanne's. We had to reactivate our chapter. After Kevin graduated, it was dormant for like a year and a half. And we started out with about 13 people who were interested, and only 4 of us actually pursued it and became members of the organization. So, it can get tough because there are financial considerations that come into it. There are grades, there's service. A lot of organizations, to Dr. Arnold's point earlier, especially with NPHC organizations, there's an expectation that you do some service before you become a member. So it's not just like, hey, step up on the scene and, I brought 1 can to an event and that's service. They actually want to see that you really want to do this for the reason and the mission, right? You want to connect in that way. And it's really the purpose of building membership for people that are going to connect and, have an impact on their community. So that point, we just, we don't want to miss that point either. All these bright minds, no questions. I heard someone.
Sean, I see somebody named Sean who has a question.
Go ahead, Sean.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good. I actually wanted to ask, is Gettysburg in the process of adding more chapters or no?
Right now, you would not believe, or you might believe how difficult and how long it's taken for us to get these 2 chapters authorized, the ones that are authorized now and just don't have any members. These corporate entities are like big business. and they have so many rules that have to be followed. And part of the issue is for every chapter, undergraduate chapter that gets established, there has to be a graduate chapter that takes responsibility for them. And when I say take responsibility, it wasn't this way back in the 70s when I was coming into it. You had the grad advisors had to come up periodically to Penn State from Harrisburg and see what we were up to. Today with Alpha Kappa Alpha, there must be an actual graduate member present at every activity, every single activity. And the chapter for Alpha Kappa Alpha, the closest chapter is Harrisburg. Well, these are women who have lives and families and all of that, and it's hard to get them to commit. So we ended up with Delta Sigma Theta and Phi Alpha because they had graduate chapters that would commit to doing it. So without that we can't exist, because that's how our structures are. So if we could find more who were willing to send their graduate members up to to oversee things, we would have more.
And to that,
oh, sorry, Darrien.
But you got
a bit of Gettysburg history. Phi Beta Sigma, Zeta Phi Beta, and Sigma Gamma Rho have active charters to be on campus. It's just a matter of getting interest in membership and starting the process all over again. Sigma Gamma Rho was the very first organization on campus in 2007 to charter a line and have members here. And next week on the 18th, we're going to have a panel of Black Greek Letter alumni talking about their experience pledging here at Gettysburg and starting chapters. And there are some that also participated and started their process and journey into Greek life in the graduate chapter. So as a follow-up to this event, this is recorded and we'll share it with everyone, but then I'll also be able to send you all the invite to that event so that you can meet some of the living Black history, like the founding chapter members of those organizations here at Gettysburg.
Oh,
and chartering that. Thanks, Monique, and that's a good plug. I would hopefully all y'all will attend that. Chartering a chapter on a campus, especially at a HWI, is not always easy. And so doing that work, not only getting the people, but connecting with the school, connecting the organization, it takes time. And before my time here, I worked at York College of Pennsylvania, and we actually chartered the first and only MPAC organization there, Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated, but it took us 2 years to do it. So it's not easy work. It also helps to have members of MPAC organizations on campus. So, you have myself, you have Dr. Arnold, you have Dr. Ty Redden, who's in faculty. You have Tyra Crosby, who's in admissions. You have Dr. McKinley Melton, who's also faculty. So, we have members of MPAC organizations.
And Dr. Charmaine Cruz,
yes, Dr. Cruz. So we have members of Greek letter organizations on campus. It helps not only the campus, but also helps the organizations, that Jeanne's talking about, to feel like the efforts will be sustainable. Because one of the things they don't want to do is to put their time and energy into chartering a chapter for it to not keep going 4 or 5 years later, to have people graduate and then now you have a chapter that's inactive. So that is a really important point, is really the sustainability of it.
Right.
Good question, though. Really good question, Sean. Who else? All these bright minds.
What else can we tell you? Well, here's someone.
Jacob?
Yeah, you mentioned that part of the chapter's creed and everything was service. So I was just wondering, what forms of service did you guys do while you were in part of the organizations in school?
Wow, I'll really have to think back now. I told you it was 45 years. I'll have to really push myself to remember the specific projects. But we certainly had fundraisers for different things. I know one thing we did do all the time was go on all the different walks that they had for the different health conditions, whether it's heart health or breast cancer or that kind of thing. That was something that college students we could really do without too much difficulty. We could organize it, we could collect the money. So we did a lot of fundraising in that way. some of the things I've done, and I think this was more in a graduate level, but it could be done undergraduate. We connected with the local nursing home in the area, and we like developed a buddy system so that we could go and visit. You know, we got assigned to someone, and I had the same person for like 8 or 9 years, you know, that you would really build a relationship with the person. And a lot of, you know, folks in that situation don't have any family anymore. And so you really become their connection to the outside world. So we try to balance what we do between the fundraising things and then the hands-on impacting students, you know, students or elders' lives. So we tutored in schools, you know, we would be big brothers, big sisters, you know, make a version of that. And later, because I had done that in undergrad, as an adult, I've done that as well, been a big sister. So it kind of, you know, stuck with me, and I've done it a couple of different times in my life. But those are some of the things I can think of, activities. I don't know about you, Darrien.
Yeah, in college, Jacob, it was American Cancer Society for sure. Also, we did a lot of work with Big Brothers Big Sisters, and then Westchester University had a community center that it wasn't like in real walking distance. You know, I would there's somebody from Westchester area I would call out, but I'm not going to do that. But it's right off a high street. It's within walking distance of the campus, and we would do community service at the community center in Westchester. That has, for me, to be honest, Jacob, it's grown more post-college than when I was in college. Mm-hmm. So now, you know, like I sit on the board for Philadelphia Futures, which I absolutely love. You know, as a volunteer, I do a lot of work with the YWCA. I do a lot of work with the American Cancer Society. Gosh, Big Brothers Big Sisters. So, and it's actually a few Y's, Lancaster, York. So it's one of those things where, you know, service is, it grew for me as I got out. And part of that really, you know, it as someone who benefited from someone pouring into them and volunteering their time and helping them grow, it's my turn to give back, right, in that way. And beyond just like, hey, I'm gonna write a $50 check to help, but really, you know, giving the gift of time and service to people. So yeah, and I love it. You know, I love raising money for ACS. We do a breast cancer awareness program every year, and Big Brothers Big Sisters actually of the Capital Region, Phi Alpha, the local chapter does a lot of partnership work with Big Brothers Big Sisters of the Capital Region. So you just kind of keep it up, and it becomes less of like, I'm doing this because I'm part of an organization, and it really is just part of your fabric of your being, and your ethos as far as who you are.
Yeah, I think as undergrads, we did as much as we could, you know, with the resources we had, but what got instilled in us was the value of doing it. And that as soon as we were able and had the resources to do more, we would do more. And so it just kind of planted the seed there. And then, you know, the minute I graduated from Penn State, which was like, I went a couple of summers. So I graduated in a November, you know, an off time, even though we had trimesters at that time. So I graduated in November, and in December, I was expected to be in a graduate chapter, and I was in a graduate chapter in Philadelphia. I had joined, you have to fill out your transfer papers. It's like, go to the corporate office. I mean, they expected me to be there, you know, and I've been in the same chapter in Philadelphia most of my 45 years, but when I've had to move to other areas, of course, I joined the chapter right away in those areas. But the minute I come back to the Philadelphia area, they expect to see me there. You know, somebody knows me still, you know, and knows that I need to be in there. And so that's how I've never had a break in service. Now, since I first joined the Philadelphia chapter, there's now 2 Philadelphia chapters and several suburban chapters. But the unwritten expectation for me is I better come back to that same chapter, you know, that I came to in 1977, and that's the one I've always come back to.
Yeah, I think going along with the service piece too, Jacob, was really the importance of education. Mm-hmm. It gets like you better learn, you better appreciate education. And part of that has to do with, you know, especially when you talk about the origins of the organizations and segregation, you know, our access was limited. So when I talk about the fact that 6 of the 9 organizations started at HBCUs, you know, that's because that really was the only place a lot of us could get access to education, higher education. I don't know if I would have pursued a terminal degree or even thought I'd be Dr. anything without that kind of influence and really push. And my parents were phenomenal. I had great parents, you know, who pushed that too. But it was the culmination, right? And it's cool to get together, you know, on the Zoom call, and, you know, this person's doing this and they're doing that, and, helping the community, or they pursued this I really appreciate just how folks have grown up through the organization and the service that they do and the education that they've pursued. Yeah, good question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? I see these smiles.
Yeah.
Just like him. Like I'm just here.
What is one quality that you could say about yourself that these organizations have enhanced, about you? A quality that you think that you didn't have before, but you gain after?
For me, I think it was really leadership. I mean, not that I didn't see myself as a leader, but, at 19 years old or, 20 years old, I wasn't thinking in those terms. Am I a leader? Am I not a leader? But because at Penn State, the chapters were small, there wasn't that big a community of color. So everybody almost had to take a turn at, holding an office and doing a job. And so just a few months after I joined the sorority, I was the president of the group, and I didn't know anything about being a president of a group. And so I was feeling my way, and my, sisters were helping me. But I learned some real leadership lessons that I might not have learned as early. And one that I will never forget is that I'm a firstborn child, so I'm like pretty orderly and I like to be organized and get things done. Anyway, so apparently, I have this vivid memory early in my office as president, when some of the sisters were just not stepping up to do their part. And I was getting frustrated, and I really didn't know, what to do about that. I didn't really have the experience of, well, should I sit down and talk with them, or what should I do? And so kind of out of frustration, I would just go on sometime and do the job myself, even though it was their job. And I didn't realize that, that's not what a leader does. A leader brings people along and builds consensus and gets people to, surrounds themselves with good people to do their work. But anyway, I just kept on with my little pattern of just taking over, other people's jobs when they wouldn't do it. And finally, the sisters got angry with me and, brought me into the suite for a talk. I didn't know what this was going to be about. And they sat me down and they said, look, we really appreciate you, taking on this role, but you can't just do the job when somebody won't do it. You really have to talk to them. You have to figure out what it is that's not motivating them and get them motivated to do it. And it was like a light bulb went off. I was like apologizing, and I was like, I just didn't even realize, because I never led anything before, that wasn't how you did it, but that has stuck with me. So some of my best lessons started right there in that sorority suite in the residence hall. And that was the beginning of my, learning how to be a leader. So that has stuck with me, and it's grown from there.
Yeah. I think for me, Matthew, it's the importance of giving back. One of the things I realized was I am the beneficiary of so many other people's sacrifices. So who am I now to turn around, being that recipient, and not give anything back, not do anything for anybody else, not create inroads for other people? Like I just, and it's for me, it was a concept that it was like enlightenment, right? It was a bulb went off, and I was like, this is purpose. Like, this is what I should be doing. And I feel like it took me a longer road to get there. Like, I really feel like personally and professionally, I'm living with a greater purpose. But it took a while to get there. And the fraternity helped to shape that. It helped me to really realize that, hey, I became a member in 1996. And it's like, hey, you're a member, but, and you'll hear this adage tons of times, it's like, whose shoulders are you standing on? Mm-hmm. So while I had difficulties at Westchester University, and I had people call me things that were other than my name walking across campus, and there were people that, like, I couldn't stop giving back. I couldn't stop fighting. I couldn't stop creating more opportunities for people, because there were people who went through it worse than I did, and they still pushed on to create opportunities, right? So they sacrificed and they hustled and they did all these things to make sure that I had a chance. So I had to turn around now, and everything I need to do needs to be focused on giving other people a chance and making sure that they have access and that their futures are bright. So that's what it was for me. It really just, I learned through the organization this concept of constantly giving back. And if I get, then I need to give. And that's how I look. It's not just for me to say, all right, y'all, I got mines. I'm closing the door behind me. Good luck, everybody else. Like, who does that, right? And people do that. Like, let's be realistic. Like, trust me, I'm sure we could flip every channel and see people who are more takers than givers, right? But it really helped me understand the purpose of being a giver, understand the sacrifices that people made to get to this point, and get me to this point. You know, we talk about it bugs me out even when we were prepping for this conversation, and to think like our organizations, you know, my organization, Jeanne's organization, they were 10 years removed from Plessy versus Ferguson. Like, segregation was like that was it, and they lived in that environment and they struggled, and that they lived, there was lynching, and there were so many things that they went through. And I'm like, who am I to not give back? Who am I to not appreciate the sacrifices? So that's what it did for me. Mm-hmm. The interesting thing about it, you know, and kudos to you know, Monique et al. For putting this together when they did, was that we're in it so much, we don't really look at it as Black history, right? It's like you learn your history and you learn the members and you learn the first meeting place and you learn who the mother of the fraternity is. You know, you learn all these things, but it's not always done in the context of the day, and understanding that during that time they were like, this is Black history, right? It's Black history, and you have a chance to live it and be a part of it. So that long answer to your short question, but that is very much what I learned. Good question, though. Mm-hmm. All questions have been good.
They have been.
So you would also say that it enhanced your identity as well. It made you more connected to your roots, per se.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, Alpha Phi Alpha, when you look at, and I just go really into the weeds, but you look at the Sphinxman, you look at the pyramids, you look at all the things that are symbolic of Alpha Phi Alpha, they were very much tied to, you know, Africa and African culture and African heritage. So, you know, again, it helped me to realize that I'm part of that heritage. And also, you know, going down a path that is a longer path, you know, sometimes what you're taught in school isn't always what you should get taught, as far as your history and as far as who you are. So to see such greatness, you know, African-American greatness, Black greatness through Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, you know, yeah, I heard about Dr. Martin Luther King and Thurgood Marshall and Jesse Owens, but then it stopped there, right? I didn't, you know, learn more about it. So when you look at the deep history, very much it helped to enhance and inform, you know, my identity, and continues to do so.
I think I saw another hand. I think
I did. Is it Anna?
Anna, okay.
So how would you say that your membership in these organizations have kind of shaped your like life goals, career goals, ambitions?
Well, you know, it's probably hits on a little bit of what Darrien said, but it's, you know, it's given me, you know, a pride and a sense of responsibility, you know, that goes beyond myself. Now, of course, I got that also from my parents and my family, you know, as well. But this was an organized form of, you know, women, friends, to join with to do that. I don't have any sisters. And so for me, this was this, you know, this giant group of sisters that I have all over the country. I can just, you know, like I said, pick up the phone or send an email or whatever, and you'll have somebody there assisting you. But it, you know, it really instilled even more the responsibility as a, you know, as a woman, as a Black woman. You know, it's partly to give back, it's partly to be a leader. But it's also this collective, which is a, you know, a more of an African, you know, cultural, you know, way of thinking about the collective, you know. So you're really, we're not okay unless everybody's okay, kind of thing. And we can't, you know, another organization of women I'm a part of, it says, you know, we lift as we climb. So we are always trying to pull people in, pull people up. And I, you know, it's really instilled in me an absolute responsibility. So how does that play out in my day-to-day now? It doesn't even have to be a member of my sorority asking me for something, but I constantly get emails from graduate students who are doing a dissertation on something to do with diversity, and they have to interview someone, or they need to talk, or they need a consultation. And I, you know, sometimes I say to myself, wow, I am just so busy. I can't, you know, I can hardly fit in what I have to fit in, but it's very rare for me to say no to a request like that. because, you know, somebody helped me, somebody was there helping me. And so I feel a responsibility of, particularly if it's a woman of color, doesn't have to be a Black woman, but any student, you know, who's working, it makes me know I have to stop because somebody stopped to advise me and to help me, you know, get on in my career. So that responsibility to make the time, you know, and decenter myself sometime, even when I'm busy, because it could really just make that difference in that particular individual's process or life or career. And that's worth stopping for.
Yeah, for me, it's this concept of push-pull. And the, you know, so it's a blessing to be able to work in an environment where we get to work with students. I don't know how often y'all hear that from us, but I hope you hear it often. It's a blessing because you have the chance to leave an indelible mark on someone's life. And to that end, the concept of push-pull is making sure that you push the person ahead of you and you pull the person up behind you, right? So I see myself professionally and personally very much in that context. If there's someone in front of me that needs me to push them a little bit, and some of you already know because I've pushed some of you on this call, you know, if somebody needs me to push them, I'm going to push them. And if somebody needs me to pull them, I'm going to pull them. And that's how I look at life. And trust me, I'm not perfect at it. I'm sure there are people out there that are 10 times better than me. But when I look at what my purpose is, you know, in this world, on this blue marble called Earth, it's very much in that context. It's push-pull. And it's to push the person ahead of me and to pull the person up behind me.
Thank you.
I think we probably have time for one more. Somebody want to bring it home? Somebody want to be the anchor question? I've never run anchor before in my life for obvious reasons. I just don't run well. Go ahead, Sean. I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I guess for each of you, what was some of your favorite moments in the fraternity and sorority?
Favorite moment. Well, for me, I would have to say, you know, this is older as a graduate member, is of course seeing my daughter come into the organization. That's probably a highlight for me. So that's something we can share. So in addition to being mother and daughter, we're also sisters, you know, in the organization. That has been a high point. But I think, you know, some of the other good points have been really, I know when I was in the Philadelphia chapter, the graduate chapter, shortly after I first graduated, we had a huge scholarship program and also a program where we could connect with nonprofit organizations in the community and award them funds. And this is when I was working at the University of Pennsylvania. So I knew a lot of nonprofits, but I was serving on the board of a particular a small organization that provided respite care for families where AIDS was an issue. So you know, they just need a break from their kids or whatever to get treatment and that kind of thing. So I was on the board, and because I was on that board and I was also in the sorority, I was able to nominate them, you know, for funding that really helped their program along. So that was another good feeling. You could, you know, you knew where the needs were. You were out in the community, seeing what was going on and serving. And I connected that was a board I was on because of the University of Pennsylvania, but because I had the sorority connection, I was able to put it together and help that agency out with some funding. So that was another high point for me.
Yeah. You know, I guess mine's are probably more alpha connected than alpha specific, I guess, in a way. I mean, of course, when I became a member, it was like, wait, what? You know, type of thing. But, you know, one is the first scholarship fund I ever set up for students, because I felt like my alpha learning really shaped me in a way to provide that opportunity. And it was a book scholarship for students that I set up. And gosh, that's been probably a decade now. But it was like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, right? And then the other part, Sean, was when I got my doctorate and I got hooded, you know, and you know, I thought about it's crazy because it's in an informal way. It wasn't like through Alpha, but it was through Alpha because I had so many of my frat brothers who really were pushing me. And one of the things that anybody that decides to pursue a terminal degree or you know, folks who have their master's degrees, it can get lonely. It can get really lonely because you know, when you're studying so much, you can't hang out. Number one, and number two, not everybody is pursuing the same thing. So you know, like in my neighborhood in Philly, it's not littered with people who have their doctorates. So it was hard really to communicate what I was going through. But for a lot of the brothers that I know that already went through it, they were able to connect with me and they were able to lift me up for me to finish. I almost quit 3 times, y'all. I'm just going to keep it 100 with you. You know, it was a struggle. So those were some of my proudest moments, you know, through Alpha. The last one is I have a very close friend and colleague who had wanted to be an Alpha for years. And I don't know how many folks knew Desmond Moody. He used to work at Gettysburg. Yeah, you know Desmond.
I just talked to him this week.
Desmond was someone who was a student of mine back in 2009 when I was at York College of Pennsylvania. So to see him as a student, then to work with him as a colleague when I was at not only York, but at Gettysburg, and then to see him pursue Alpha, you know, through a grad chapter and become an Alpha, like to have someone that you're close to and walk that walk with them was just, it was awesome because I realized it was that's why you do it. That's what you do, and you lift folks up. So that was another moment I would say I was very proud. Yeah, that's a good question. So
all right, we might be right on time.
I think we're right on time. Yeah, Monique, you have anything that you want to push or plug for the group?
I added the event registration for next week in the chat, so you all can check it out. And that's it for me.